If you're talking about it, I'll be talking about it. Dennis Prager here. Join me this morning at 11, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So I don't put a lot of stock in the Bureau of Labor Statistics unemployment rate. Their measuring of it. It's certainly not the straight unemployment rate, more interested in the U6 rate, which includes those that are...
They call it the real unemployment rate?
Yeah, those that are underemployed, right?
And those that have just stopped looking, too.
But at least you can do an apples-to-apples comparison. And the left was quick to tout a declining unemployment rate during Obama's years, so you can't blame President Trump for doing the same, and particularly this number. We discussed this with Scott Shalady, the December jobs report on Friday, but we didn't get to this number as the more breakdown was done by economists. This is our friend Mark Perry over at American Enterprise Institute, whose Carpe Diem section at AEI, his Carpe Diem blog, is always excellent. That's a must-read for me. And he notes that lowest black unemployment, the gap between white unemployment and black unemployment, 3.1%. That is the lowest gap since the Bureau of Labor Statistics started tracking the black unemployment rate back in the January of 1972.
Wow.
And so this is something that should be roundly celebrated, that gap is declining and the overall rates are declining, right? That's good news.
Uh-huh.
Also, and correspondingly, 196,000 manufacturing jobs created in 2017. And 16,000 fewer federal government jobs. That's small, but still a little bit of shrinkage at the federal level and expansion in the manufacturing sector. It's the latter.
We can't do that in Illinois.
Well, right.
Expand manufacturing and reduce government jobs.
Exactly. Well,
that's the number one employer of Illinois, right?
Well, agribusiness, but it's certainly associated. Yeah, that right with John Deere and Caterpillar. Exactly right. I mean, imagine that, expanding the wealth-producing sector and contracting the wealth redistribution sector. What a concept. In Illinois, by contrast, I made this mention before, but I don't think I can say it enough, the greatest disparity between government jobs and manufacturing jobs of any jobs in the Midwest. You want to know why Illinois' manufacturing renaissance isn't occurring as it is in our neighboring states? Illinois, 175,000 more government jobs at every level than manufacturing jobs, right? Federal government, federal level, 196 new manufacturing jobs, 196,000, 16,000 fewer federal government jobs. Who's going in the right direction? For more on these topics and others, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Jim Pethokoukis, CNBC contributor, columnist for the aforesaid American Enterprise Institute. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
So what about the jobs report on Friday and this kind of the numbers within the numbers that I just mentioned?
Well, listen, we've had a very long economic recovery. It has not been particularly vigorous, but it has been steady. And so month after month, we've sort of been chopping down at the unemployment rate. You talked about those internal numbers like labor force participation. Those have strengthened. Sort of the prime age workers, 25 to 54, that strengthened. But that's what happens. You have a very long recovery, and even if, again, not particularly robust, we're adding lots of jobs every month. So listen, I have a little more. I think that unemployment rate is a meaningful number. I think that's a good number. And listen, some of these Wall Street banks, they're thinking we might have an unemployment rate closer to 3%. Over the next 18 months, and we haven't seen that since the 1950s. So right now, slow but steady.
So what is the real reason behind the African-American unemployment rate dropping to record lows? Is it because more African-Americans have college degrees?
We've had a very long recovery, so all these unemployment rates are dropping. Why that gap has narrowed specifically? Well, one thing I can tell you is that, we've seen certainly better wage gains and strong job gains, sort of the lower part of the sort of job spectrum, and on the top, not so much in the middle. So that's going to affect different groups differently. But listen, if we had another year and a half, 2 years of this kind of job market, not only would I expect wages to probably go up faster, but I would expect that gap to shrink further.
There's some suggestion that where the tax cuts may push off the natural business cycle and the downturn that is coming because, as you said, we've had this kind of long, steady, not vigorous, but long and steady recovery from the depths of the Great Recession, and that if the tax cuts push off the downturn, the market correction, say, past the 2018 election, then you've got a president who's going into his reelection or his reelection year potentially in recession. Do you kind of see the same timeline in terms of market correction, natural business cycle, that at some point this recovery is going to stall and we're going to see 2 quarters of negative growth?
Listen, recoveries or expansions usually don't end because they've just gotten too old. Usually if something happens, oftentimes that something is the Federal Reserve trying to tamp down inflation pressures, ends up raising interest rates too fast, and we get a recession. This is probably a pretty dovish Federal Reserve. They're probably going to take their time, even with this new sort of fiscal stimulus that we have from the tax cuts. So I don't know the timing. Nor would I necessarily say that a low unemployment rate guarantees anybody's reelection. If I was running for president, and I was the incumbent, I'd rather have a very low unemployment rate than a very high unemployment rate. But if you look at the 2000 election, we just had a boom period, and yet the Democrats did not win that election. So it's no guarantee.
And with respect to it's just thinking about economic growth. So the next step that you would take, there's discussion what's on the congressional Republicans' agenda and the president's agenda in the first quarter of this year. Is it going to be something on the spend side, entitlement reform, which of course is Paul Ryan's bailiwick, or is it going to be a big infrastructure project that President Trump wants to do, some kind of public-private partnership, as politicians want to say about these big public works programs, or is it something else that they should be doing to forestall that recession that some are concerned about?
Yeah, I'm very skeptical about getting entitlement reform because I think Paul Ryan is maybe the only person in Washington right now who really cares deeply about that issue. I'm not sure anybody else does. I'm very skeptical about the infrastructure piece as well. I mean, there isn't really a plan put together yet, and we're moving into 2018 midterm year. I just tend not to think anything big is going to happen. Listen, I think at least for the moment Washington should be in let's not screw anything up stage. I think there's a lot of stuff happening in the tech sector that will begin sort of filtering into the rest of the economy, which should boost productivity. I mean, I hope that happens. And I would hate to start screwing that up either by doing another big spending plan that's going to enormously raise the deficit. Even as is, we're probably going back to trillion-dollar deficits. I remember when people used to care about that. They apparently don't care about that anymore. We should kind of take a breath and think more deeply about what we need to do about some of these longer-term issues, particularly education, which is an issue that excites nobody, but it's probably the most important one for our long-term growth.
Well, I think on the top of his agenda for President Trump is building the border wall and tying that to DACA. But where are we going to get $18 billion?
I don't know. Same way we're getting $1.5 trillion. $18
billion.
Charge it.
Yeah,
Target.
exactly. It's pocket change. Yeah, just run my Amex on that. What about the energy sector? Kind of an appreciated event last week because of all the furor of the Michael Wolff book was the Trump administration giving the green light to drilling rights off both the eastern and western seaboards. And the energy sector, one of the most robust sectors, probably deserves a lot of credit for that expansion, however kind of slow and steady it was. And Trump seems to be doubling down on energy independence.
Well, I mean, it's amazing, I think, still sort of an underreported story about what's happened. I mean, there's been sort of two big, massive technological innovations in the 2000s. One has been the Internet and the advent of smartphones, having a supercomputer in your pocket, and the other has been sort of the shale revolution. One, I certainly read a lot more about the one on the front pages of business sections than the other, but both have been tremendously important, and I think will continue to drive growth going forward.
All right. He is Jim Pethokoukis. He is CNBC contributor, columnist for the American Enterprise Institute, and a stable genius in his own right. He is a Jeopardy champion as well.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Half of that description is true. Not saying which.
Stable? It can't be stable.
No, listen. I report, you decide. Hey, sports fans, stay warm.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.